HeartCry, The Chronicles of Jacen by Clyde Smallings. Prologue, The Kidnap. The cybernetic man breathed calmly as he sprinted through the catacombs underneath the large structural fortress of the princess. The air was chilly as he ran, and his calm breathing caused a small bloom of vapor to exit his mouth and nose every time he exhaled. The dark-colored robes he wore provided a natural camouflage in the underground environment and quietly flared in the speed of his run. The man set his face in a grim line of determination and was intent upon completing his mission quickly. His movements were precise and sure from the millions of technologic microbes that existed within his body that kept his muscles supple and firm. With great speed and accuracy, he sprinted past several ancient-looking full-length mirrors that were covered with dust and cobwebs. The mirrors momentarily reflected his appearance and showed a man who was of average height, attractive, well-built, with glowing silver-colored eyes and shortly cropped hair of a glowing silver-white color. This was the Omegan known as Hecate Riley. As his evolved senses continually measured the flight path of his run, he thought of his peculiar mission, to kidnap his baby half-brother. With a flick of his supervision, he glanced down at the small bundle of blankets he held protectively to his chest as he ran. In the second of time he glanced at the child, he could see the infant was awake and breathing quietly in their flight. He took note that the baby looked healthy and vibrant, and had a ruddy appearance with a curious diamond-shaped birthmark under its left eye. The Omegan came to a smooth stop in his run nearby a hidden corner and took a momentary look behind him. He surveyed his path with superhuman vision and saw only crumbling tombs with old and decaying corpses wrapped in muslin. His enhanced eyesight, hearing, and smell communicated to him that only darkness followed, and with hyperspeed he mentally ran through the algorithm he had projected for his escape from the momentary prison around he and the child. Hecate had visited the large estate 1 year before during a celebration held by the tribe's chief, and remembered the layout of the large barony. By using the catacombs underneath the estate, he had successfully eluded the guards patrolling the grounds, had silently assassinated the infant's personal guards, and had stolen the newborn from its nursery, all without causing an alarm. As he looked around himself, Hecate tried his best to forget about the still bodies of the 2 guards he had killed. In all his many years of life, he had not become so mechanical that he did not feel remorse when he killed someone. His powerful mind quietly reviewed the nascent potentials of the deaths of the 2 men, the emotional impact of the deaths upon their households, and the misery caused by the loss felt by their loved ones. His hyper-aware state was momentarily distracted by the distaste he felt growing within him at the cost of his mission, and he took a moment to close his eyes and regather his focus. Just then, the child suddenly began crying in a loud, high-pitched braying noise. Lost in the cascade of his mental calculations, Hecate was momentarily surprised by the noise and swung around. As he did so, he roughly scraped his arm on the edge of a nearby tomb that had begun to crumble away. The skin of his arm was torn open by the jagged edge of the tomb, and his enhanced blood, hot and red, began dripping toward his hand. Hecate gently placed the infant on the ground and ripped a piece of cloth from his robes that he used to bind the cut. The dark cloth began to absorb the blood, but it continued to drip onto the floor. Holding his wounded arm to himself, Hecate took another measure of his surroundings. As he turned from side to side, a droplet of his special blood dripped away from his hand and landed directly into the newborn's crying mouth. The newborn immediately went silent. After another moment passed, the child stiffened and suddenly screamed in an explosion of sound which sounded like the roar of a great forest cat. The loud noise startled the Omegan as the sound of the newborn's great cry echoed loudly in the underground cavern. Feeling a sensation of dread that he had not experienced in many years, Hecate stared down at the stiff child who was no longer crying. As he looked at the infant with his powerful vision, he noticed the child looking directly back into his own eyes, causing him to feel a moment of revulsion. He knew this ability to focus the eyes was impossible for a newborn, yet this child was doing it, and his hyper-quick mind began calculating all possible suggestions to explain the strange behavior. Suddenly, the baby grinned at him, causing Hekate's blood to chill even further. Then the baby laughed as it grinned without ever taking its eyes away from his own. The sound of the laughter was deep and strange. Hekate's normally controlled heartbeat momentarily sped up at the strange behavior of the child. The infant continued to stare back at him and would periodically chuckle from its position upon the ground in the same unusual way. Keeping an eye on the strange child, Hekate leaned against a nearby section of wall and closed his eyes. He began a rhythmic breathing while he placed a hand over his wound, and in this quiet manner he concentrated. After a moment had passed, he opened his eyes and stood up and removed the bloodied cloth away from his wounded arm. He flexed his completely healed arm and noted the healing properties brought on by the microbes within his body were still functioning perfectly. A light discoloration was all that remained of the wound, and the Omega knew that soon even this would disappear, leaving only healthy and strong tissue behind. Intent to be on his way, Hekate bent over to pick up the baby when the child's hand suddenly darted out and grabbed his fingers. Hekate cried out in surprise as the baby squeezed his hand in an iron grip. Using enhanced strength that would normally have broken bones, Hekate ripped the child's hand away from his own and quickly put the baby back on the ground. Just then, the hairs stood up on the back of his neck and he sensed something else had entered the area. Kneeling to a squat, Hekate relaxed his shoulders and slipped into the superconscious trance state known as the observer effect. In this shamanic trance, he began to perceive the atmosphere around him with much greater clarity than even his evolved senses could reveal to him. From a state of deep relaxation, time suddenly seemed to flow more slowly. Hekate noticed the dust motes closest to his field of vision that floated on the air currents and simultaneously looked at the cobweb on the far wall that was within his peripheral vision. And immediately upon entering this heightened state, Hekate perceived the reason for his disquiet moments ago. 2 nearly invisible air demons were encircling the area, searching for him in their dark and nebulous way. Hekate's trance vision showed him the outline of the dark and shadowy masses that floated in a halo of tentacles. With a grimace of distaste, he knew the demons were the dreaded pets of the infant's protector, a witch who controlled lesser demons with dark arcane magic. The witch was the child's mother. Hekate slipped out of the hyper-aware state and quickly grabbed the child with a new sense of purpose. Summoning control of the powerful forces within his body, he began running as fast as he could toward the exit where he would escape with the child. The friction from the wind pressed against his body as he generated extreme momentum in his run. Hekate was not concerned about the demons but was set upon escaping without being noticed by the foul creatures or without alerting any guards. He winced as the baby grabbed him again in a monstrously strong pincher. In his flight, Hekate considered the child's strange behavior and wondered at its great strength. The wind created a vortex of sound as he sprinted away, and he made a mental note that the baby's strange manner was something that would need to be further investigated at the earliest possible moment. Hekate gathered his much younger half-brother more firmly to his chest and swiftly made toward the nearby exit that would lead to the great forest beyond the estate. He made it to his private hover cycle hidden within the forest without incident and carefully loaded the child onto the craft. The Omegan looked down at the child who had fallen asleep and considered the inherent danger of the baby. The child would likely be a potent, an offspring of an enhanced being that would potentially inherit its parents' genetic traits. And if its witch mother meant to shape the child with a nefarious agenda of her own, it might interfere with the hard-won progress they had made in the last 20 years with the neighboring tribes. The sleeping child was also his much younger half-brother, and with sudden compassion for the infant, Hekate realized he would not be able to contribute to whatever foul plan its mother or father had in mind. He made his decision and readjusted his plans.